Well, good evening, ELI. If everybody can finish taking their seats, we'll get on with the program and the dinner. Wonderful to be with you all this evening. Super energizing for me to be reminded of all the support and interest and encouragement that comes from the community that supports ELI. You are all ELI in a very real sense of things. You're the sponsors of this dinner. You're the life's blood of this wonderful institute and co-investors in this important work that's done by and through the Environmental Law Institute. Been a really vibrant year for ELI, and for that matter, for this city. And it's great to have a moment to catch our breath and to revel a bit in the spirit of true nonpartisanship. We've got a great awardee to recognize tonight in Occam Steiner. We'll get him fully introduced in a bit, but we have in Occam someone whose life's work has significantly furthered on the international stage the basic value set of the Environmental Law Institute, this idea of building a sustainable future through effective governance and rule of law in the environmental arena. Occam will be introduced by Kristalina Georgieva, who is the #2 at the World Bank and as a major figure in her own right when it comes to environmental governance and rule of law. A warm welcome to you both. We're so pleased to have you here with us, and it makes a great night to celebrate the mission and undertaking of the Environmental Law Institute. We have a lot of luminaries with us here tonight. Of course, you are all really luminaries. The one that shines brightest for me is my wife, Sasha, who's with me tonight. She puts up with a heck of a lot, and I'm very thankful for your being here tonight, sweetie. Tonight's a little bit of a family affair for us, which sort of unusual. But we had a wedding a few weeks ago, and our daughter Carrie and her new husband Bill are in the house at table 27, so congratulations to the newlyweds. We have with us tonight quite a number of members of our board of directors, which is really a fantastic group of people, a cross-sector collection of leaders. Just this year, we added new board members from Pfizer, Toyota, Schiff Harden, Jenner & Block, the Heritage Outdoors Project, Gibson Dunn, General Electric, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, Amazon, and Paul Hastings, adding to what was already, in my humble estimation, the best board in the country. I was wondering if I could get the ELI board members to stand up. Can you stand up, folks? This is a very active board in the life of the Environmental Law Institute, and we're deeply appreciative of their service and their support. There are some new additions to the ELI team I wanted to mention. Charles DeLeva, the former chief counsel, environmental counsel at the World Bank, has joined us as a visiting scholar. He's here with his wife, Layla. Really pleased to have you as part of the ELI enterprise, along with Patty Beneke, who's the former director of the North American Office of the United Nations Environment Program, who's also joined us as a visiting scholar. So these folks are bringing their considerable capacities and connectivity to the work of the Institute, and we're pleased to have them with us tonight. I'll also mention at the head table we have an old friend with us. I shouldn't say old, a long-standing friend, a young woman who's a long-standing friend, Linda Fisher, the former Deputy EPA Administrator, former Vice President at DuPont. Wonderful to have you with us, Linda. We have a fair number of folks with us tonight from the new administration, and we want to thank you for your presence and for your service. There are a lot of folks in the room here tonight who have walked the path that you're walking or are about to walk in the past, and we know these jobs are powerfully demanding. They really are like drinking from a fire hose when someone else is handling the flow valve. The world around you, we know, can be quick to condemn and slow to thank. So tonight, we just want to thank you for your willingness to serve, and the country really needs the very best that you have to offer, so thank you. And we very much hope that, like the administrations before you, you'll see the Environmental Law Institute as a helpful meeting place to share ideas, explore options, and test approaches. So it's been a busy year. Let me talk about what's going on the international front first, since that's kind of our focus for the evening. Internationally, our work continues to grow as countries reach for help in getting on top of their environmental problems, and funders increasingly see the importance of building strength in key anchor institutions if progress is to be made. So we have new work, training judges in Indonesia, building forestry protection systems in Malawi, developing climate resilience regimes in places like Kazakhstan, working on the interface between gender and water access in the Nile River Basin, and working as well on this broader dilemma of environmentally displaced persons. This all, of course, complementing our ongoing and multifaceted work in places like China, Latin America, and elsewhere. I'll mention that in China, we're on the brink of launching a collaboration with multinational companies that would have ELI and a sister Chinese entity serving as facilitators of a dialogue with the Chinese Environment Ministry about environmental regulation in China. This is a new role for ELI. But we're excited about it, and we see promise in the initiative, and we're at this point looking for companies who are interested in participating. So please give us a shout if you think this may be of interest to your company. The long and short of it, folks, is that the needs of the world are such that the opportunities for ELI to be a positive agent of change in the world are limited only by the funding available to do this work. And in this regard, I'm pleased and very much humbled tonight to announce a major gift to ELI by the family of Ellen Athas, who tragically left us earlier this year. Ellen, the wife of our dear friend Al Furlow of Perkins Coie, and mother to Matthew and Andrew Furlow, remember as a fixture on environmental law and policy through her work in the nonprofit and government sectors, including in service of the Council on Environmental Quality. Her accomplishments were many, but some of her greatest achievements were in the area of ocean protection. Accordingly, Al and his sons have chosen to remember Ellen by creating 2 programs at the Environmental Law Institute: the Ellen Athas Forum on the Social Impact of Fisheries Regulations, and the Ellen Athis Workshop on Marine Protection in the Gulf of California. We will be formally launching these programs in the near term, and we're indeed privileged to carry them out in Ellen's memory, and deeply thankful to Al and Matthew and Andrew for entrusting us in this way, and to Ellen for inspiring us through her work. Shifting gears domestically, we've been programming around things in motion like implementation of TSCA reform, but we're also running hard to keep up with the folks on Pennsylvania Avenue, in particular in relation to the emerging thinking on regulatory reform. As a centrist organization, our orientation towards regulatory reform is to look at our current system of environmental protection as neither a failure nor a panacea. Plainly, the system has produced remarkable gains in environmental quality in this country, and that should not be discounted or taken for granted. But the system is fairly long in the tooth, like many of us, and was built on a set of assumptions that may not hold with equal force today. So our notion is to tap into this tremendous energy around regulatory reform and help shine a light on smart reforms that can economize and enhance efficiency without compromising the environmental bottom line. So for example, and those of you who participated in today's programs know this by now, but we've got this collaboration with the Environmental Council of States and with the support of the American College of Environmental Lawyers, looking at the question of cooperative federalism under the rubric of the Macbeth Dialogues. This is a program launched with the support of many people in this room in honor and memory of our friend and former colleague, Angus Macbeth. We're working with some of you to take a fresh look at the so-called audit policy. We're working with others on the question of how to more meaningfully credit private sector governance regimes and how the government approaches its work. We're working with others still on the potential implications of environmental big data that is being liberated by low-cost sensor technology. All of this while working hard to keep our membership informed and to help you stay on top of your game. If you're here and not a member and might like to be, there are cards on each table with some basic membership information. I invite you to take those with you. Take one for any friend you may have who might benefit from this affiliation. And if you want to talk about membership, I'm sure any of the board members or the staff would be delighted to do that during the course of the evening. The members will be happy to hear that of the imminent launching of the e-version of our flagship publication, the Environmental Forum. Look for the January issue of the Forum to visit you on your various devices in a format consistent with our modern consumption patterns and needs. And so, friends, as I hope you can see, ELI, your ELI is on the move, and none of this would be possible without your participation and support, including the support of our star sponsors for this evening's dinner. And so, without further ado, it's with sincere humility and a fair measure of personal embarrassment that we offer you this year's thank you video.
It's been a very busy year. Thanks to you folks gathered here, we've been bringing common sense to environmental governance through programs, publications, convenings, and colloquia, shoring up capacity and building up the rule of law. Boot camp master classes to keep you informed. TSCA climate briefings, also reg reform. Trainings all around the world where there is need. Enforcers, judges, citizens, and companies will now review some places we have touched through you. New York, Illinois, and Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Mexico, Virginia, Maryland, and Tennessee, and all around the Gulf of Mexico and Texas, Washington, and California too. We've also touched Antarctica, Zimbabwe, and Liberia, Ecuador, Colombia, Chile, Indonesia, Bermuda, also Vietnam, Malawi, Mexico, Japan, Canada, Malta, China, Spain, many more that we could name. But for now, it's time to thank the sponsors who have kept us in the game.
We would like to first thank our superstar sponsors, Beverage and Diamond, Crowell and Mooring, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, K&L Gates, King and Spalding, and Latham and Watkins.
We would like to thank the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, Arnold and Porter K. Scholler, and Hess.
Nossaman, NOGC, and Covington and Burling. Hogan Lovells, PepsiCo, and the Environmental Defense Fund.
We would like to thank Paul Hastings and Perkins Coie.
Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw, and Pittman, Dorsey and Whitney, and Syngenta.
We're pleased to thank Aiken, Gump, Strauss, Hauer and Feld, Jenner and Block, and Catton.
Toyota, Ballard Spar, Bracewell, and Exelon.
Greenberg Traurig, Hunt and Williams, and Hush Blackwell.
We'd like to thank Keller and Heckman, Pfizer, and Wiley Ryan.
Boeing, Holland and Knight. IBM Corporation, WilmerHale, and Johnson Controls. We would like to thank Schick Hardy and Bacon and Kirkland and Ellis.
Bay Environmental Technology Corporation, Bergson and Campbell, and Skadden, Arps, Slate, Meir, and Flom and affiliates.
Farella, Braun and Martell, and Sidley Austin.
We've been working on resiliency and siting wind facilities, the circular economy and intergovernmental harmony, sustainability, TMDLs and NRD, eco-peace building and new technology and indoor air quality and implementing TSCA, and we're working to cut down on food wasting, green infrastructuring. We hope that you can see yourselves in all the many things we do, for none of this would ever happen without you. It would not happen without you. It would not happen without you. Thank you.
I need to play for this crowd more often. That was not nearly as good as you all thought it was, but thank you. Thank you so very much. Hopefully that comes close to expressing to you both our deep thanks and gratitude, but also proof that there's apparently very little we wouldn't do for your continued support. I want to give a special thanks to Colin Gibson Tanzel, who's the technician and creator behind the video. And all of the creative thought that went into it. It's one of our biggest challenges for the year. But thank you. So with that, I'm going to invite you to enjoy your main course. And we'll be back up a little bit after 8 to start the award presentation. But thank you all.
Ah, that just works. Good evening. It is the baseball season in the United States, and that I'm reminded of the words of a famous American baseball player, Jackie Robinson. He said, "A life is unimportant except in the impact it has on other lives." And I have the great honor and the distinct privilege to introduce Kristalina Georgieva, the Chief Executive Officer of the World Bank. And Ms. Georgieva will introduce Achim Steiner, who's a recipient of our Environmental Law Institute Environmental Achievement Award this evening. As the CEO of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and the International Development Association, these are the World Bank's lending arms for middle-income and poor countries, Ms. Georgieva works to build support across the international community to help mobilize resources and develop more effective solutions for the poor. Deeply knowledgeable in international development and finance, Ms. Georgieva is widely respected for her efforts to mobilize the international community to find innovative solutions to today's complex challenges and has been lauded for her global humanitarian efforts. A native of Bulgaria, Ms. Georgieva has helped shape the agenda of the European Union since 2010, first as Commissioner for International Cooperation, Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Response, where she managed one of the world's largest humanitarian aid budgets and established herself as a global champion for resilience. She also served as the European Commission Vice President for Budget and Human Resources, where she tripled funding available to the refugee crisis in Europe. You should interrupt me and applaud her, please. She drove rapid progress toward achieving a target of 40% women in management by 2019 in order to improve the Commission's gender balance. But what I found most impressive about Ms. Georgieva is she's not ever satisfied with half a loaf. When she joined the World Bank, she just told me this a moment ago, these are not in my remarks. She spoke to Jim Kim, the president of the World Bank, and she said, 40% is not a good goal. That's like being half pregnant. It's not really being equal. Let's make our goal 50%. That's equal. So prior to joining the European Commission, Ms. Georgieva held multiple positions at the World Bank, including Vice President and Corporate Secretary and Director for Sustainable Development. In sum, Ms. Georgieva has been centrally involved in the rule of law and she's been centrally involved in the rule of law and sustainability across the globe throughout her illustrious career. Initiatives that are at the core of ELI's mission. You see, hers has been a life of value, and it's my privilege to welcome Ms. Georgieva to the stage.
Thank you, Ben, and a very good evening to all. When Scott called me to suggest that I might be privileged to introduce Achim Steiner this evening, he didn't tell me that I would be standing in a room with so many people who deeply care about the environment. So that is the cherry on my cake tonight. Thank you. But of course, my role is to introduce a great leader and a personal friend, Achim Steiner, for an award that he so much deserves. When I think of Achim, a phrase that comes to my mind is one attributed to President Theodore Roosevelt: speak softly and carry a big stick. You will go far. And Achim, for sure, is a soft-spoken man, and for sure his strength of conviction is the big stick he carries around. I have known him since the late 90s, when he was Secretary General of the World Commission on Dams. So I met this young man, soft voice, iron will, and an incredible ability to bring stakeholders from all walks of life on a very controversial topic, and then drive a consensus that up to that very day defined development of dams in the world, this wonderful world of ours. And then I witnessed firsthand how he would deal with very difficult issues, and in particular, how he would make our beautiful planet something that we all can, from the hearts of our hearts, commit to protect. And what I would want to say about Achim this evening is that he has managed to do something absolutely remarkable, to close 3 circles of life. One, academia. He studied at Oxford University, and then in 2016, he returned to Oxford to become director of the Oxford Martin School. 2, his service to the environment. He started out at the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, in 1991, and then he returned to lead IUCN as its Director General in 2001. And then he said, okay, IUCN is a great platform, but why don't I step up to a more difficult place? So he took over UNEP. And I think we all would agree he has done an incredible job in both places. And the third circle in his life is his commitment to development, to people who are destitute, who for no fault of their own find it hard to reach out so they can be able to live up to their full potential. His first job was at the Rural Regional Development Department at GTZ, Germany. Germany, by the way, is his kind of half country because he was born in Brazil. So he started there, and now he has returned, closing the circle, as director, as administrator for UNDP, leading one of the most important agencies to make sure that the world is a better place for all its people. So 3 circles of life. But what we now know is that with technology, if we are lucky, Achim included, we can live to be 120. So I would say 3 more circles of life, Achim, to be able to close. And I certainly hope to be right next to you as your good friend to witness it. So let me close with the following. Dear Achim Steiner, thank you for your service. Please keep it up. Thank you. Congratulations.
say, Aka, maybe you stand closest to me. Here we go. We're going to present Akim's award to him, and then he'll offer some remarks. I'm going to read just a portion of this, although it's so rich that it all really should be read. But it says, in recognition of outstanding contributions to the advancement of environmental law, policy, and management, a singular champion for policies that bridge the natural and human spheres, Occam Steiner has throughout his career positioned environmental law at the heart of sustainable development and the goal of a just, fair, and maintainable future for all humanity. Steiner's leadership has established effective policy frameworks that both conceptualize and realize improved human well-being, poverty reduction, environmental progress, and social equity. His vision and guidance have effectively made the case for compatibility between environmental protection and economic growth, establishing guideposts for governments, organizations, and companies across the globe to follow. In short, no one has brought more breadth, innovation, and sustained effort to building holistic environmental governance systems and to producing the future that we want and need than Occam Steiner. October 18th, 2017. Congratulations, Occam.
You're taking it away?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight, because even though I have this wonderful honor to receive this award this evening on behalf of the Environmental Law Institute, let me also say, having so many lawyers in one room, so many lawyers dedicated to the environment in one room, is a very reassuring sight. And how often do you hear that being said? Let me first of all begin by thanking the Environmental Law Institute for this extraordinary gesture. It really is a very humbling privilege to be invited by people who I consider peers of mine, and to be given this award at a moment in time when I have actually, in some respects, stepped slightly away from that traditional focus on the environment, or so it would seem to some. I would like to thank Ben, first of all, as chair of this wonderful institute whose board you now lead. I'd like to thank Scott Fulton as president, as friend, as companion. We have walked together over many years in trying to understand how environment and law could become the perfect marriage in life. Through the perspectives of both advocates and advocacy, but also through the foundational principles of a judiciary in our society, and through the constant review of how we interpret law in the light of science, changing knowledge, and the need to evolve our own understanding as societies. And to both Ben and Scott, I would like to say thank you for having found me, for the work that I have committed myself to, and for giving me this extraordinary opportunity to be here with you tonight, and to use this moment also to say that journey that some of us have shared together, that many of you in this room have shared together in your careers, in your lives, is an extraordinary privilege. I would also like to thank Kristalina. We are really friends who go back a long way, although sometimes we lost sight of each other is probably the wrong way of putting it, but the ability to work together so closely. I'm truly excited by the prospect of having such an extraordinary individual, human being, and friend now being the chief executive of the World Bank Group. She will change this organization, and to have her here this evening, not only to introduce me, but also to reach out to you as a community, is an immense privilege. Thank you for your kind words, Kristalina, but above all, thank you for the leadership that you bring to so many different issues, whether it is the humanitarian end of the spectrum of international solidarity, or now leading the premier financing institution in development in the world. Let me also take this opportunity to thank you, because even though I meant it as a little bit of a joke to say to have so many lawyers and environmental lawyers in a room, I actually take this evening as a tribute to the work that you do in your law firms, in your institutions, in your communities, because you are part of that which defines this notion of the rule of law. And I think it is not an inappropriate theme to choose in accepting this award on the occasion of the Environmental Law Institute bringing you all together once a year, and just reflect for a moment, in light of so many things happening around us in this world, on the meaning of the rule of law and the environmental rule of law. The Institute is one of the premier institutions engaged across the globe, and in wonderful musical journeys we just saw how far this network reaches. In fact, I think Scott knows that he has his next career already cut out. He just hasn't dared to come out yet and take on the stages of opera or indeed of musicals or wherever it may take you, Scott. But this institute is an expression of both solidarity in working with partners across the world, but also of sharing a unique journey that the United States, as a society, as a community in shaping the governance structures of a nation, has passed through. The rule of law, the separation of powers, and in the last 50 years, I would argue also the journey of the environmental rule of law, define a significant part of the leadership that the United States has played, first of all for itself as a society, but increasingly over the decades, also in influencing, inspiring, and catalyzing others to look at that concept of rule of law as being fundamental to, first of all, the way we govern ourselves, secondly, also to how we resolve differences and sometimes competing interests, and yes, even conflicting or competing views of reality. Healthy environment, prosperous economies, vibrant communities founded on the rule of law. That is the vision of the Environmental Law Institute, and it is one that I can wholeheartedly associate myself with, because whether it was in my career in GTZ, in IUCN, in the World Commission on Dams, in UNEP or UNDP now, that principle is the fabric of my way of looking at what defines our ability to live together in this world. But rule of law was something that I discovered as I went along, and friends such as Scott and others in this room, including my best man who is here this evening and who shall remain anonymous but is very much part of that journey, opened my eyes to the fundamental value of law. And let's be honest, it's not something that as a non-lawyer you would necessarily gravitate towards, because the cliche of lawyers is usually that they complicate lives. And the further I've gone up in my professional career in institutions, the more I can confirm that notion, because actually lawyers immensely complicate my life. But every now and then you come across somebody who views law not as just something that prohibits, restricts, constrains, but that actually empowers, that speaks to fundamental principles and allows us to do things that otherwise we would not be able to do together. And this is a very important part of understanding that principle of centrality of the rule of law in our societies. Law is not just about codifying the rules, it's actually about codifying the foundations of what binds us together in society. It expresses values. choices of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and making that part of a social compact, but codified in law. It is principled. It also provides us with due process, because every now and then, the only thing we have left is to turn to the law and then the courts and the judiciary in order to ensure due process in our society. Behind that is a very simple assumption: fairness. The rule of law is above all rooted in the principle of fairness. And it is therefore often invoked also that it is blind to power, influence, money, ideology, or faith. It is based on the construct that we as mature, sovereign societies and people agree to draw on in governing our lives. But perhaps the most important part, and that in part also was best understood if you look at the social and the environmental history of our societies, is that law is an immensely powerful instrument to liberate, but also to protect. Very often, the courts are, in our societies, the last recourse that we have. When everything has failed, we turn to the courts because it is our hope, our aspiration, our expectation that they will rule in a way that is not beholden to any particular interest, represents the compact on which we agree to live together in a society, and above all gives expression to fairness. Now, the environmental community has used law in the last 50 years increasingly effectively, partly to codify what science was beginning to tell us about what is happening to us and our planet, the environment around us, partly to also enshrine the responsibility of those who harm towards those who are harmed, to also capture increasingly the responsibility, and this is new in human history, of an intergenerational justice principle. Because we are perhaps only the second or third generation in history through which we, or with our decisions and choices that we make, literally will define the options and the realities of future generations. And who actually protects the interests of the unborn generation? The environmental consequences of actions that we have taken, often even out of ignorance and not out of a deliberate sense or intent to harm, are today part of the fabric that we have woven to allow us as societies to practice a responsible set of choices, defined not only by self-interest, not only by the interest of my neighbor with whom I don't want to have a conflict, or who I don't want to do to me what I would not wish to do to them, but also to accept a fundamental responsibility. The environmental rule of law speaks to our generation, the generation that is defined by living in what some have called the age of the Anthropocene, that age in which for the first time in the history of this planet, we as human beings, as humanity, have or are on the verge of becoming the dominant force that shapes the future of this planet. Not just environmentally, in terms of ecological footprint, but even geologically. That is a challenge also to lawyers. It is certainly a challenge to that notion of the rule of law, and it is perhaps where we finally converge between those who use the law for advocacy and activist purposes, those who use the law for fundamental principles of justice, and those who believe that the law is fundamental to defending the principles of freedom, choice, and justice. Let me end by saying that I'm truly humbled this evening to receive this award. I began my life on a farm in the south of Brazil, a son to a farming couple who learned to ride a horse before he even knew how to walk, and never thought that he would find himself one day in a room with 600 professionals from the world of law and the environment and being awarded this Environmental Achievement Award. I certainly never thought I would work for the United Nations. And I certainly didn't anticipate a year ago to be standing in front of you today with probably the most unexciting title you can hold in my profession, which is namely administrator. But I end by saying that I accepted the invitation by the Secretary General to return to the United Nations because I truly believe in the principle upon which it is built. Namely, first of all, on the failure of what led to the Second World War and the catharsis we experienced. The tragedy of when human beings stop talking to one another and resolving conflicts is perhaps forgotten by many of us, fortunate enough not to have to live or having grown up in a society ravaged by war. It is also the principle that in this day and age, the idea of a United Nations, of multilateralism, is not some abstract notion. It is the vision of the Charter of the United Nations, which begins with very simple words, we the peoples. And it is also a realization that to this day motivates me to work in this complex, complicated, often conflict-defined and even contradictory environment to accept a very simple notion. We need one another. And where are the institutions that will allow us to transact on this fundamental recognition that we need one another in order to succeed, to thrive, to protect, and above all, to ensure that future generations have something to look forward to with both optimism and with pride in their parents. I hope that this idea will accompany you in the work that you do, just as I hope that in a few years' time I will be able to say, yes, this was why I chose to work in the United Nations. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Achim. I've had the privilege of hearing Achim speak for a couple dozen times along the way, and he never disappoints. And we'll definitely want to capture that and render it. That's one of the best explanations of rule of law in the environment space that I've had the privilege of hearing. So thank you so much for your work and for sharing your insights with us here tonight. This brings us to the conclusion of our program. In some ways, it's sad to stop. It feels so good being here with you all. Thanks for a wonderful evening, a fantastic 2017. Let's all embrace 2018 together and see what we can do. I'll mention, of course, as you all know, this kind of an event doesn't happen by itself. There are a lot of laboring hands, particularly at the Environmental Law Institute, that make this happen. And I want to just thank all of the ELI staff who worked overtime. These are folks who are overworked and underpaid as a general proposition, but they really stretch out in this moment of the year, and we're deeply indebted to the ELI staff, and I want to thank in particular Melody DeMolling, who where's Melody? Oh, there she is, right over here, Miss DeMolling. She loathes this kind of recognition, but she really is a wizard at pulling this event together. You can't imagine how hard she works at it. So thank you so much, Melody. And I also want to thank the Voice of God. There was a young man who came to work with us not too long ago, Rob Kelsey, who has the most beautiful and rich, deep bass voice. So we decided to deploy that in addition to his legal talents and make him the voice of God tonight. So Rob, wherever you are, thank you for that. And Those of you who have been to this event before, you know what happens next. The bar is just out this way and up that way before you get out the door. There's a lot of really valuable and meaningful network that takes place once we leave our tables. Please make good use of that opportunity, okay? And we'll look forward to working with you in the coming year and seeing you again here next year. Okay, thank you. Good night.